Welcome back, everyone. Companies today have more data than ever. With this comes along potential threats and risk, especially with data security. Thus, it is vital for organizations to make use of the right data tools in order to not only achieve their development goals, but also to protect their data. The next workshop is providing quality data tools for development goals without compromising data security, where we will deep down on emerging trends in data tools and how they can incorporate them with the development goals. How to protect your company data from threats and risk on security. What are some of the best practices on choosing the right data tools for the organization? To conduct this workshop, I would like to invite Gurvinder Singh, Vice President and Global Head of Data Science at TaskUs. Over to you, Gurvinder. Welcome. Gurvinder, you are speaking on mute.
Am I audible now, Amita?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, thanks, Amita. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Good afternoon, all. Thanks for joining this session. It's honor to be here with you all today evening. And I know it's a afternoon session, and I'll try to make it interesting so that you will enjoy this session. I'll quickly share my screen. Uh, is my screen visible? Yeah. So today's topic is how can we provide quality data tools without compromising the data security for the organization growth. And I was attending one session in NASCOM a few weeks back, and there was one line which was stated by one of the presenters, which was, and I'm sure you would have heard this, right? Tough time will never last. But the message which was shared was that tough time will last. But the question is why? In our context, tough time will last because data does not sleep. And we are living in the data world. We are producing data every activity we do, and that is the whole point of this session today. Moving on, when we see why data does not sleep, because when we see humans are creating everything today for their convenience, right? Moving on from non-digital to digital, everything is around data, from mobile to TV to whatever we do. And if we go to corporates, they were already ahead of the curve and they were using the data. While we are doing everything for the convenience, there is willful slash carelessness which actually put that data at the risk. And that's the whole objective of this session today. What I'm going to cover today, next few slides, is to set the stage for the today, and then we'll deep dive to the topics which we want to cover today. Um, as you all aware, that companies have more than data than ever, which was produced in the history. We have overall 7.9 billion population, 5 billion mobile user, 4.7 billion internet users, generating almost like 4.5 billion active social media player, and they are watching 3.5 million videos per minute. There are tweets which are almost like 6 million tweets per minute. What all this translating into, right? So if we talk about top five, Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they are almost storing like 1.2 exabytes of data already, right? And this is a massive, massive data. When you save so much of data, along with the data, we need to kind of protect the data, right? And that is the whole objective why we are here. If we see what has happened so far, um, 37 billion lines of record is already being stolen. 33 million unique users data is already being stolen, right? That is the world which we live in. I'm sure you would have heard of the recent case, right, of Twilio, where a social engineering text message attack was done, where the attackers were able to pull the information of passwords of Twilio employees. And Twilio provides the digital authentication solution to all the providers, right? So just getting into the Trilio environment, they were able to get into their customers' environment as well. And then the entire data got exposed. Similarly, you would have heard Starlink satellites, right, which are very famous now because of Elon Musk's, helping even in the Ukrainian war. So there was a researcher who was able to crack the Starlink network through a $25 homemade circuit. So the message which I'm trying to give is whatever we do, whatever we invest, our data is always exposed here. Um, can we quickly push the poll for everyone, please? And I request if you can please answer these two questions. Let me push the poll, sorry. I can only see the results, right? I'll give more 30 seconds to kind of any more. Okay, so 56% of the data is okay. Now it is changing. I'll wait. So the poll results are more than or around 50% of the users are having 5 to 10 devices at home. Okay, I'll publish one more. Thank God, I see some no. Yeah, I think around 80% of the people are using same. In fact, I'm also using the same mobile to access the office as well as my personal work, right? And why? Coming back to the presentation, and that's the topic which we want to quickly touch upon. That while the border lines between the office and the personal life has is being blurred, right? It was blurred more than ever now because of COVID, right? Everybody's working from home, and that actually increases the surface area of attack even larger than what it was earlier. So earlier we used to go to office, the probability of attack was in office, but now we are at home. We our Wi-Fi's can get accessed, our TVs can get accessed, our mobile can get accessed. So that is adding more complexity even to kind of protect the data. And the increased surface area, and it will further keep increasing, right? If we see we are moving from all the things which were non-digital to digital, from analog to digital, and that is a risk we are carrying in this digital world. Quickly moving on to what we are going to cover today, right? We're going to cover four topics, and I think those four topics are how can we protect company data, because that is the key objective. What are the emerging trends and tools, data tools, which can help us protect the company data? What are the guidelines to choose the right data tools? And what are the tools specifically to protect the data? I am going to cover a lot of stuff. We will keep the technical stuff in the end, which is the tools, because the entire process of protecting the data moves around three pillars, and I want to talk about that. So moving to the first pillar, which is how can we protect the company data? Right? If you see today, massive data are moving from at a blazing speed, and the expectation is to have the actionable insights from the data, right? Because we need to take an action. If the data is sitting, then it is at less risk than when data is moving, right? And then managing everything while protecting the data make it complex. I'm sure you would have heard of the things called fault lines, right? The fault lines are basically are rocks which are typically are under the sea, and there are the cracks between the rocks. Whenever there is a little bit of movement which happens, that does not generate any kind of the earthquake, but when the large movement happens, that generates the earthquake. In our line of business, I call this fault lines as resulting into either data leakage or data attack, right? What is our fault line? What is the fault line which we need to address as an organization? There are three fault lines. You would have heard people, process, technology. I call process, technology, and people. Because first we need to fix the processes, what all we need to address, how we need to address it. Then we need to bring the technology and the tools, how we will address those processes, how the processes will get improved, enhanced by putting the technology in place. And then last come the people. Why? Because if we put the best of the process, if we put the best of the technology, if we don't have the people to follow it up, we will still have a problem to breach it. So what I have done, we have divided this into four distinguished part as far as the data is concerned. The first is data flow and processing. You know, what we do in this stage, we figure out what is the data type which are flowing, right? What type of a data which is flowing, how data is flowing, how data is being processed, how data is being handled, right? When it is flowing from point A to point B, what whether the data is real time or the near real time, right? All that will define the process part of it, right? And then we define which is the data protection tool which you need to put when it is moving from one element to another element, whether we need to put that the data protection at a field level or a file level or a network level. All these processes will become a part of the data flow and the processing engine. The second part which we should address is data discovery, classification, and compliance. There are the most important point now is, of course, I'm sure you are aware, is the privacy of the data, right? But how can we ensure that privacy is protected till the time we know what to protect? And that is where the data discovery comes in place, right? So defining what is the data which needs to be protected, how needs to be protected, where it has to be stored, in which format it has to be stored, how to store it, how to mask it. All that is a part of data discovery and the classification compliance. And that all depends on the which industry you are focusing on. So, for example, if we talk about health industry, right? In health, the compliance is HIPAA. We need to follow the HIPAA compliance. If it is a personal data, then we need to follow GPR, CCPA, which is California Consumer Protection Act. If it is a banking industry, then we need to follow the Basel rule. So depending on the industry which we are supporting, we need to figure out how we will classify, how we will know which is the sensitive data, how we will kind of put the classification and discovery solutions so that we can protect the data. Third element is the data storage and the access management. So what we have done so far, we have moved the data, we have processed the data, we are able to identify which is the data which is classified, which is the data which is sensitive, how we are compliant to GDPR, HIPAA, and everything. The next is how we will store the data. Now, this all depends on how much data you are handling, right? The best solution which today we have is like big data, which can handle massive amount of data, and those are the specific tools. Along with the storage, there is another element of access management, right? Who will access the data? How they will access the data? Will we open the entire data for them, or will we open the specific data points for them, right? Then, along with the storage, we need to also put the rules around how we will destroy the data when data is not required, right? What is the DLP configuration? How we will mask the data? All these processes which we need to define, not only define, then we need to put the policy around it so that there's an adherence which will keep going around that. Then the last stage is data activity monitoring, right? So if you put all the tools together in place, if we don't actively monitoring it, who is accessing the data, what frequency they are accessing it, is this the legible way they are accessing it, or what kind of a file activity they are tracking, how things are monitoring, moving, all that falls under the data activity monitoring. So these are the four pillars if we need to put together to ensure the data security and data compliance is managed. And of course, these all four pillars have process around it, technology and tools around it, and the people who are going to manage the things around it. Moving on, but if we don't make the data protection as a priority across all area of the organization, will still breach the data. If we are when we were working inside on-premise data, then the data security starts from the first phase of the organization, which is the security guard, which is manning the office, right? So that is the reason we need to ensure that from that particular security guard to even the CEO of the organization, everybody follow the same process priority. Till the time we do that, we will not be able to drive the entire data protection across the organization. Now, moving on to what are the emerging technologies. Emerging technologies are, what has happened. In fact, emerging technology cycle has shifted, and become shortened because of this COVID. But digital transformation has triggered many data security tools and technologies in place. The first among them is, of course, artificial intelligence. Right, artificial intelligence is uh, a technology which we can use across the board. Right, but if you see the underlying technologies under AI is machine learning. You first start with putting the learning algorithm, and then it translates to artificial intelligence, and that is how they work hand in hand to kind of ensure to build the tools. What kind of a tools which you can build through AI, right? If you see, talk about face recognition, NLP, what kind of a, the text which are getting exchanged, uh, identifying the automatic threats, putting those rules, right? And we have seen now during the COVID, right? We have seen how artificial intelligence has helped people do near tracing, because that was able to happen because of the artificial intelligence. Similarly, we can use it in our day-to-day data security elements, not only at a um, uh, the data physical security level, but even at the data layers level. The second emerging technology is adaptive authentication. And what is adaptive authentication? Right, basically, it's a risk-based authentication, depending on, and I'm sure you would have seen it, right? For a lot of time when we change the laptop and we try assessing the banks, nowadays they ask you us one more authentication layer because the hardware got changed, right? So this is how there is an adaptive authentication process which is being used, where we see the hardware, the physical location, the physical device, the software, the IP address. We put all those different factors, and then we put the risk. And if we see that the risk score is higher, then we kind of put the multi-factor authentication to ensure that the people who are accessing the data or trying to access the network, it's a genuine ask than a non-genuine ask. So that's another area which is picking up very fast. Of course, it's a risk-based, tool-based thing which you are putting in place. Next is blockchain. Now, blockchain is mostly gets synonymous with the cryptocurrencies, but blockchain as a technology, the underlying theme is the ledgers. I'm sure you all are aware, but blockchain is emerging as another area where we can put the security in place. All the ledgers which we kind of make in blockchain, these are unmutable, you cannot break it. We can help them track documentation, right? How documentation is flowing from one point to another point, how data is flowing from another point to another point, who is accessing it, what is the access rule around it. If it is a the information which is confidential, we can always put through the blockchain to track end-to-end view of it. And that's where the one usage is NFT, of course. The other usage are smart contracts. All these are being put in place because of blockchain, because blockchain is another security key element which is coming in place. And of course, the basic is the cryptographic, the technology which is being used here, and that can help us even authenticate the users in future. That's what we see, which is coming our way. Now, big data is in place for years, but all the big players, if we talk about Microsoft Azure, Google, Amazon AWS, there are many players which are in this field. Depending on the use case, how do you want to structure your data, how your data is flowing, whether it is a structured, semi-structured, or not structured at all. What is the source of the data? Based on that, you can put all the input processes in place, and this is emerging, right? It is not that big data is old or new technologies are coming in place, which can help you define not only storing the data, but even from the inception to process to store and then to kind of use the data. So big data is another large technology play which is coming in place. Next is the containerization, right? And this is helping us. So it has both, right, positives and negatives. But containerization is another technology where you have the base container, your OS as one, while you can have multiple small applications which are independent of each other. That will help us to kind of protect our main core data, while your application data can reside in those containers. And those applications have their own small mini databases rather than getting the access to the whole large warehouse. And then you can protect the data at the node level rather than protecting the whole data. While enterprise can protect the data at a centralized theme center level, But at an overall level, the containerization will help us to kind of structure the data well, put the apps together in a structured way, and they will sit on the nodes, we call them edge, where we can need to only protect the data at the edge. The last emerging technology in security is zero trust security structures, where the way we say it, never trust, always verify, right? So and multi-factor authentication is one of the way we ensure it. So typically wherever there is a trust happens, there that is where the breach happens. So that's the whole new structure, security structures are in place for everybody and anybody in the organization. We need to ensure zero kind of trust in the security, and that has to be based on the least privileges, right? We will not give all the privileges to anyone in the organization, even at an admin kind of level. We need to still follow the same rules for all, kind of to protect the data. So this is around the emerging technologies, and there are many tools which are coming in place, and it will continue to come in place. Um, these are the tools which, if you, what I have done, I have kind of mapped a few tools or for each of those categories which I mapped, and they are not the full stack, right? There are many tools, and all these tools are dependent on which technology you are using, how you are using that technology, how you're going to deploy that technology from an end-to-end point of view, which data, which is the source. But I mapped a few, right? If I were to put an overlay of all, then of course the big players like Google, Microsoft, all will come in place. But there are specific tools and the vertical which I mentioned. There is two-factor authentication, mobile VPNs, data classification. I spoke about that all in previous slides. Data masking, deduplication, and data warehouse tools. Similarly, we have a data mapping tools, data modeling tools, activity monitoring tools, regulatory and compliance tools to help kind of secure the data. All these tools have their own specialties, what they bring in place depending on what we can want to drive home. Can we publish the next? Let me publish the next survey, please. Give me one second. Yeah, I think this is very interesting, right? So bad actors are getting smarter than the good actors. 85% of you believe that um, uh, bad actors are becoming smarter. And I think this is fair, right? In my view, yes, the bad actors are becoming smarter, and as we progress, the technology the good actors will keep breaking the bad actors. I would not say it is 80 or 90%. My view is this is a technology play. Every technology which will bring the security, which will bring any technology which will come in play will also bring the bad actors in place. But in my view, the balance cannot be established. But yes, the threat will always keep increasing. And why threat will keep increasing? The way we started this conversation, because the surface area is increasing, the awareness among people is what we need to focus on. That is the reason it is increasing. I've covered a lot of tools, but I want to emphasize on the last thing before. I think I had one more poll. I asked one more question which got missed. Give me one second. Okay. The another question which I asked, which you answered, is how you received data security training communication in last 3 months. 73% of you said, and which is a good thing, because the whole premise around security is how we can keep reinforcing the same stuff over and over again. Because the bad actors, as you said, 90% of them, right now it is 91%, right? They are becoming smarter, and they will keep beating us every day, bringing new technologies, new faces, new things in place, right? And we need to be smarter than that. The one way to be smarter than is, of course, to train people. There was another question which I kind of posted here. I, yeah, so which is, did you pass the last simulated phishing attack? We kind of published it earlier in the conversation, but I was about to push it here. And 80%, 84% of you said you passed, right? But unfortunately, I failed. I failed in my last test because the as you said, bad actors are becoming smarter, but the whole process of reinforcing the training, the whole process of re-emphasizing, creating the simulation, doing the stress test is how we can kind of protect our data. Moving back to the presentation, we have covered many tools, right, in the previous slides. In our view, most important tool to protect data, and I think that's the point which I want to drive home today in this conversation, is human, right? Because everything is around human. We put best of the tools, still, we can get beaten up by the bad actors. And our poll also state that 90% of the bad actors are, they're smarter than us. And of course, we need to beat the bad actors. We need to beat the bad actors to protect our data. And I think 85% of you said that you passed the phishing attacks. And I think the lesson for all of us is, or IT organization is, how can we make the test even smarter than the bad actors? Because the results which are coming are not that way. Because if you see, 95% of the cybersecurity issues can be translated to human errors, right? And that's a key message which I want to give, and that's a key takeaway which I want to give it to all of you. That if we continue doing what we are doing, that will not be helpful. Bad actors will continuously become smarter than us. If we keep reinforcing by training, if we keep reinforcing by simulation, if we keep reinforcing by driving more phishing attacks ourselves, then only we can beat the bad actors. There is no other way we can beat the bad actors. 95% of the cybersecurity issues are traced to human error. So while 85% of you say here that you pass the test, then I definitely see an opportunity there that we need to make tests better in future to kind of ensure that data security is in place. Um, Moving on, and I think I covered it, but I want to re-emphasize, right? I think train educate is one part of it, right? If we can keep training, keep educating, and I saw that poll result. How many of you gone through the training? 75% of you have gone through the training. So 25% itself in this forum, right? We have 76 votes are at the risk already because you are not trained in last 3 months. This training has to happen every month because the bad actors are becoming smart. 91% of you are saying it. So, the first is the train educate because that's where the whole crux is. But training education will not happen. We need to stress test the system. And the best way to stress test is to run lot of tests, the phishing attacks, the emails, generated by the in-house teams, generated by our own cybersecurity experts, so that we can preempt, find those errors where people are failing, who all failing, to kind of train, educate them again, test, retest, train, educate, test, retest, and there are few who are not making or becoming serious, and we need to also kind of see how we can, address that part. The most important third element, which is preempt, is another angle which I want to touch upon. How can we preempt, right? How can we push agenda that before even having the cybersecurity attack? How can we empower our employees, our teammates, that before any threat can happen, they should raise an alarm, right? These are the three key pillars. Whatever tools we put, but if we don't put in place, then I think we're going to lose the war against the bad actors. Um, that's another point. Last point which I want to quickly cover is one good advice which I used to hear long time back from my parents and to kind of save the relationships. And if we follow that, we can still meet it, right? Which was think before you speak, and I think it's mostly valid today also. But in the today's world which we live in, I think speaking is one element, of course, very important still. But I think if we have to protect our organization, if we can think before you click, right? If we can reinforce that behavior for every mail, every text message, every message, anything around us, right? If we kind of ensure, then we'll be able to protect ourselves really well, right? We touched upon in the beginning that the the lines are getting blurred between the office and the home space, and that brings this more important of to the element of think before you click, because as an individual we can be aware because we are trained by the corporates, by the organization, but how trained our families are, right? How trained our parents are, how trained our kids are. Till the time we reinforce net education to everyone, I believe we will always be short to the fall short to the bad actors, because they will keep finding the shortcuts to kind of sniff away from our mobile devices to our personal mobile devices to our network, and then from our network to the corporate network. Just want to put some numbers in perspective, right? How cyber attacks are costing the companies. This is a recent study by Cybersecurity Ventures. Um, there is an estimated cost, right? And which is, the numbers are quite huge. It is 7 trillion USD per year, which is translating to almost like a 13 million per minute. So this is the kind of money which we are spending to kind of secure our data, training, retraining. But that's how then that's the kind of world we live in, right? So we need to protect our data. We need to protect our data. Think before you speak. Think before you click, and protect the data. I was reading the newspaper yesterday, and one last point, and then I will open the conversation for questions. Is I saw this video, very interesting. I will leave up to you to kind of digest it. I know I covered quite fast. We still have, I think, 10 minutes. I'm sorry, but we can open it for the questions. Thank you. Amita, any questions which specifically for me, because I see other questions here. Yeah, I can see Srinivas, good actors, fire the very sensitive people, but that is usually very technical. Yeah,
Uh,
so absolutely. Let me
Hey,
answer
hi,
that.
can you hear me?
Yes, Amita, I can.
Yes. So let
So I
me.
saw one note, Amita, from Srinivas, right? So so Srinivas, you are absolutely right, right? That good actors come. So good actors, bad actors, I think keep it aside. One message, if I need to kind of put together here is, so we touch upon process technology people. Technology will keep evolving. Processes we need to keep defining, right? The key important message is the people part of it, right? We need to drive people to handle that breach. Why? Because I typically don't make this statement, but allow me will say, fool with the tool is still a fool, right? Because people, when they make mistake, we become fool. I became fool to cyber attacks, attacks many times. Whatever we think of ourselves, but the technologies are in place, right? So, for example, AI, blockchain, um, authentication systems, we put that in place. That will enable us to kind of put the first filter. That is helping us to kind of take care of almost like 99% of the cyber attacks which are hitting us. But 1% which penetrates is kind of uh, create this kind of a damage. Go ahead, Amit. I think you want to say something.
Yes. So another question which we have from the audience talks about. Just give me a second. Uh, are cyber threats real, or they are just something created to hawks the customer? So are.
So that's a very good question, because it is like, is COVID real or it is not, right? So in my view, for every side of the technology, if we say in the past or with every experience, there is always a bad actors in the play. So cyber threats are, in my view, are real. We see it every day around us. I'm sure we know. Um, if you keep going through all the content, we have so many threats around us. So my view is, yes, in my view, cyber threats are absolutely real, and we need to definitely keep enhancing ourselves to address from the technology point of view. One example which I gave as a real, the very recent cyber attack which happened on the Starlink satellite, which is again, a very new technology to provide satellites. What this person researcher has done, he has created a hardware with just $25, replaced and kind of flashed his dish, replaced that radar of the dish with his hardware device, and then the entire Starlink got exposed. Now he's being hired by the Elon Musk and team, but yes, in my view, they are. And
Okay,
that is the reason we need to spend that much of money.
understood. And Gurvinder, I would request you to please unshare your screen. I think we are seeing multiple screens on the stage.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks a lot.
Another question we have is, what is your perspective on data security during COVID times?
Yeah, so I think in my view, COVID has helped us all to kind of, you know, uh, cross the digitization journey really fast. What we were thinking that work from home is possible, not possible, has happened, right? Very fast. So, for example, this forum, right? This forum got created in the COVID times. We never had a virtual forum. So, COVID has definitely helped to move the security, data security also, kind of the journey faster. And I touched upon one example of AI, right? AI enabled during the COVID time to recognize faces, recognize near contact ratios. All those technologies can be replicable in our real world of security as well. Right? There is no need for a physical security. If you have an employees, you have their face recognition. You can kind of let them in, or without even doing much more on the security. So the answer is yes, it has shortened the cycle. It has helped us enable many technologies which were not possible in the past, right? For example, desktop recording. Uh, if somebody will click the picture today, we will get notified, right? That you are clicking a picture of a sensitive information, which was not developed during the non-COVID time.
Right. Another question we have is, what data security measures we can make in cloud environment?
Yeah, so this is the question which I keep getting, right? So people who are in an old organization who are still in the native system, they keep asking this question that how can we protect the data in the cloud? I will answer it in a two-way, right? One, most of, if you see the cloud is occupied by the large player, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. These are the three large players, and we have many more players. All those players, they not only offer you the cloud as a service, they offer you along with the cloud all the data security tools at each and every stage. And that is bundled offer with the gift. So of course, cloud brings you a cost element, saving access data anywhere. That only made us, work from home easy in the COVID times. But in my view, shifting from the native system to the cloud is easy because one, there are inbuilt tools which are there, right? You don't even have to buy them separately. The second is the entire DLP process can manage really well. You don't have to put another warehouse to kind of protect your data. You can protect your data in multiple clouds at multiple places at the same time. All the technologies like data masking, data classification. For example, if you go to a data warehouse tool like Redshift or Snowflake, right, for storage, all these classification, security analysis, HIPAA compliance, CCPA compliance, all that are inbuilt feature in those tools. So that kind of help us enable the security journey.
Right. Another question we have is, the security precautions are essential, but quite a lot of tools are expensive, which sometimes is difficult for startups to spend money on. So, do you foresee a change in the shift on the infra and availability of the tools in near future?
So I have done my own startup a few years back, so I can very well relate to it. The answer is if we see today's environment, startups are well equipped to manage the security than the in native environment, and then in the cloud environment, all those softwares of securities are also not that expensive if you have to buy it standalone, right? Because they are inbuilt as a part of the overall cloud infrastructure. So it is not that you need to buy one piece at a time. You can buy all in a go. From a startup point of view, if your data is not huge, I think we don't even have to have the data warehouse, right? You just pick up few S3 or S2 instances on, for example, Amazon, and the protection, data protection mostly come along with it. So by virtue of moving to the cloud, you get the security free alongside of it.
Another question is, how can I reduce the cost and maintain the quality? So, typically, from the organization's perspective, how do you keep the balance of cost and quality in terms of the security?
Yes, exactly. I think that's a wonderful question again, right? Because the basically question which is asking is how can we address the cost as well as the the data protection, right? Which is how can you balance it out? And that's a very good question because I wish it is easy, but I will divide that into three parts, right? What we need to see is the threat, right? What you want to protect. That threat you first you need to kind of assess. Then you need to assess the spread of it, right? So if let's say threat happen, then how far it can go. So if it can penetrate entire organization, then of course your kind of spread is also higher. Then after that you have the for example the cost, which is why we will pick up the tool which can take care for your threat versus the spread. So if your threat is limited and your spread is limited, then your cost will definitely be lower. But if your threat is huge and your spread is huge, you can't, right? You need to incur the cost to protect your data. I was speaking to one of my colleagues 2 days back. So he gave a wonderful example on this point. He said it is like COVID versus monkeypox. So when COVID happened, right, the entire nations got blocked because the threat was huge, the spread was huge, and that is the reason the cost become the huge element in this. But if we now see monkeypox, right, the spread is less, the threat is less. We hardly see any cost attached to it. So just to kind of bring a real life perspective there.
Right. Another question is, um, how do we build the technical competencies and especially the solutions to trail the bad guys or trail the cyber attacks? So, what kind of technical competencies and solutions an organization should build on?
Uh, the one aspect is of course the full technical tech stack, right? Tech stack has to be taken care, and I cover that into the four pillars which I have defined, right? How we kind of bring the data, then how we sensitize the data, then we store the data, and how we monitor the data. So we need to have the full tech stack to kind of manage it, because that's basic, right? If you don't put the tech stack, then of course you are putting everything in the threat for threat. Coming on to the training, right? For each tech stack, there are different set of tools. So we need to have those specific people trained on those technologies because they are evolving very fast. But I think I'll keep going back to the same point, right? If we don't train people on how to counter those attacks, how to identify those threats are not going to come in the malware or the network. They will not attack it because those are all covered through AI, blockchain technologies. Networks are taken care. They find the weakest link to enter the network. And that weakest link is where we started this conversation, right? Either carelessness or illful, where we kind of people penetrate. So, in my view, coaching, training people, kind of stress them and kind of preempt them. These are the three elements we keep driving them. I think we'll be able to protect our data. Technology will keep evolving. We need to keep upgrading, but we need to kind of focus on the people part of it.
Right. Another question is, uh, do you think is there any role of ISP, internet service providers, in terms of data security?
My answer is yes, but now ISPs are kind of mostly covered because when you play in the of course ISP are playing their role. They are the starting point of the data protection, and all ISPs are governed by the rules and the regulation to protect the data. But ISPs, beyond ISPs, is where our home network starts, right? Where the first line terminates at our house or office is where our the internet terminates. That's where our journey starts. If you protect that, so for a lot of times, if you can go, I think I'll give you, one more example. 30% or 60% of people don't even change their Wi-Fi passwords. So if you are on Airtel, your by default password is your mobile number, right? You can put it. Your by default password is 12345678. You are done, right? Your Wi-Fi is compromised already. We don't change it. Second is, you would have seen this mail, right? Almost 60% of the passwords which we give are breakable, right? We have passwords like ABCD1234, ABCD at the rate 1234. Your first three names and your date of birth, right? At the rate. So these are all breakable rules. So ISP, in my view, is doing what they're doing. Our life starts from where data starts in our hand, mobiles, for example, and then of course our network. And if we keep the strong password, and that is the reason if you see from the corporate, we keep emphasizing change the password every 30 days, change the password every 45 days, keep you know the password which is strong with one special character, one capital, because then it becomes difficult for bad actors to play. But those are the smaller things which can protect data more than the technology. And but technology stacks are there, right, to help, but the weakest link is where the break happens.
Another question we have is, are there any guidance on how to write a better code that can prevent us from security threat? We have been following secure practices, but an organization wants to understand more in terms of, are there any guidelines or guidance available on the same?
There are many. So I would say there are many guidelines for writing the good codes, and codes went through multiple layers of kind of cross check before it finally hit the production stage, right? So um, there are many, and there's no one specific rule which we can tell her here, inform here. But there are softwares, as I mentioned, right? AI as a technology is one element which will pick up, which I mentioned, right? So there are software which can automatically detect, kind of risk, for example, from a code point of view. For example, a lot of time, and this is from the data science point of view, you write a code to access the data warehouse. And basically, what you are doing, you are opening a door from a physical world point of view. You are opening a door, and then you get an access to the data. Now, the best practice on that is when you get the data, you need to close the door also. Lot of people don't do that, right? So they write the code, get the data, they access it, they never close the port, right? So those are the smaller practices which are now being kind of addressed through very simple AI platforms where they see this port is open for last 30 seconds, 1 minute threshold, they close it. Because if you keep the door open, then the threat is of course obvious, right? So those are the um, um, tools and technologies which are available in the stack where things are taken care, but these are organization specific. We don't do coding per se, but we are part of the data science team. But yes, we do code. But yes, there are many best practices that we follow. The tools are basically handy.
Right. Another question we have is, what are your thoughts around consent management or data privacy aspects for applications which provide personalized insights reports and largely contain PII data?
Um, this is very interesting question again. See, if we are on internet, then we are bound to share the information, right? The best way to do it is stay away from internet. So that we can't do in the current world. But wherever we are giving the PI information, we need to be very careful in what we are giving, right? What we can avoid. A lot of time when we kind of provide mobile without even thinking whether we should give mobile here or not, right? So a lot of time we give our documents for scanning without even thinking once. It's again going back to the same conversation that if it is very important for you to provide the information for that website or for that product or for that shop where you are visiting, then only you should provide it. But otherwise, we need to protect our own data. But if you are on internet, and bad actors are very smart, right? Our digital clone is already existing in the internet, right? If I stand here as Gurvinder Singh, there is a digital clone standing somewhere in Google's workshop or Microsoft workshops or Amazon workshop, which know everything about me, right? I think I don't even know that much about myself. But the good news is they are trying to protect it. But if you are on internet, my guess is you cannot control your PI information. Be smart about it. What you are sharing, share it digitally rather than physically. Ask question why somebody is asking, whether it is really important for you to give that information there.
Thank you, Gurvinder. I think another question we have is, how do you manage your personal privacy on the internet.
It is both the same in my view, right? If we can't protect our official data, forget about protecting ourselves personally. I can give one example of myself. We think we are very smart. I goofed up in my last phishing attack. I fall for it. I pressed click button and of course I failed. Now on the personal front, I was booking one um, hotel few months back, and I got a very good deal, and I pressed for that deal, right? And it was I don't want to name it, but it was a very relevant website, and then I realized that, oh God, it is for today. So I was booking a hotel. They never shared the date, because that is how they are becoming smarter, and I end up booking my own data. PI information you can share. The best way, which I can say is, and I explain. I'm going to re-emphasize it. Share only if it is needed, right? Share your date of birth if it is actually needed, or you create your own digital dummy date, right? If somebody is pushing it, and you know it's not a relevant, it's not a government or GDPR compliance site, share your dummy date. Right? Don't share your original date. Don't share your original wherever possible. Uh, share where share with care is the only thing which can protect us all. But PI information is all there. You can search, you can find it. I started this conversation with um, 33 billion records got already pulled this year. 33 billion lines is massive. 33 million data points has already pulled this year, right? And if you see 33 million, maybe all my data is already there in the web, including credit card and the passwords. Forget about the PI information.
Right. Another question we have is, what's your take on zero trust? Uh,
I think I love that. If you honestly ask me, one thing which can protect us from the emerging technologies is the zero trust safety. Because if you keep by default putting a question mark on everything, then you are safe, right? Wherever we do mistake when we have the trust, but breach happen when you trust. When either you trust that email, or you trust that link, or you trust a phone, or you trust that whatever, right? So I think the whole concept of zero trust is don't trust. Give minimum access, right? So, for example, if I'm a database administrator responsible for the warehouse, nobody will give me an access to all the tables on the warehouse, right? We will give limited access. We'll ask questions. Uh, you know, so if I am responsible, I will not give access to myself also. That is how they play the zero trust play. That you never know when you become a bad actor from the good actor. So, in my view, zero trust principle is a most followed process now across security agencies in US, in Europe. That is how they are creating their networks. That is how they are protecting every asset of the government. In my view, that's a very important the new emerging. It's not a technology, but structure. But of course, first you put the theoretical structure in place, and then it get followed by all the technology and the intervention and the policies which get implemented from network switches to software to the hardware.
right. Another question we have is, how to take care of multiple devices uh, over one home, office, Wi-Fi, etc. So I think multi-devices security is an important area. So any thoughts and best practices around it?
So if you see, we touched upon that point called increased surface area, right? And surface area is increasing. Uh, I never thought my washing machine is going to be smart, right? Now it is also smart, and it is also linked with the Wi-Fi. So it is also pushing the data, how much load I am giving and all that. So one breach can happen there also. So in my view, the best way to do, which people are now suggesting, is to have two networks at home. You can keep your personal network, all your personal devices, all your mobile, all your TVs, fridges, etc., on one network, and one official network, and follow the guidelines for both networks. Not even because the device can be common. And as I mentioned, right, people don't even change the default password. WS4 compliance, if you do it, then your password are protected. Most of the routers can be hacked in less than 10 minutes at home, because we don't bother the guy who come to kind of configure it. We trust him. He will give us some goodies, and we'll just sign it up. I think the best way to what organization reinforce all of us to change password. I wish I can run another poll. I'll ask one more question. How many of you have changed your Wi-Fi password in last 45 days? I can tell you the answer will be no here, and including myself, right? It is pain to change the password. If you don't change the Wi-Fi password in 45 days, then it's prone to get hacked and detected. So every policy which we follow in office of changing password, if you can replicate it at home, I think that can help us protect it. But being aware is the only tool, Lamita.
Just last question for the day, Gurvinder. Can you give some examples of bad actors disguised as good actors?
Oh God, this is a loaded one. Um, Bad actors disguised as good actors. I think if I need to answer it, everybody, when we are searching for Google, right, we are giving everything to Google. We are giving everything to Amazon. We are giving everything to everyone. So they are not bad actors, but in a way they are influencing us, right? What to watch. So I don't watch Netflix today with my own preference now, right? I get pushed to watch. Similarly, the bad actors, most of the people, wherever the breaches has happened within the organization structure, Amita, the disgruntled employees become the bad actors, right? Employees where we have a lot of trust, we share a lot of information with them, when they kind of leave the organization or they are about to leave the organization, if we don't protect our assets, then if we don't protect our data, then of course they will turn bad actors. And I think I touched upon those points of putting those monitoring tools to see the behavior. So we have observed in my last organization, when people leave, their tendency to increase the download data increase also, right? Because they are trying to take whatever they can, and this is where we need to be more vigilant now what they are taking. So most of the disgruntled or people who are leaving the organization, they end up doing the breach.
Right. Thank you, Gurvinder. I think this was very wonderful and insightful conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thanks everyone. It was a great session. Thanks, Amita.
Thank you. So now we move on to our next session for the day. Uh, Persuasion through hyperpersonalization. This workshop will cover overview of persuasion, how persuasion and personalizations connect each other, and this session will also break down to atomic components, customizing and training the data, and we'll also talk about hyperpersonalization at different points in the user journey over a customer lifetime. For this, I would like to invite Masood Nasir, Vice President, Advanced UX at Human Factor International. Over to you, Masood. Welcome.